Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legions of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Crest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we are on day 115 and we are covering Unitatis Redintegratio 15-16. It's on the differences in customs between East and West. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we talked about the ancient history of the Eastern churches and how we need to respect that when doing ecumenism with them. Today we're going to continue chapter 3, Church and Ecclesial Communities Separated from the Roman Apostolic See. We're going to continue section 1, the special consideration of the Eastern churches. And today we're going to talk about their valuable liturgical, canonical, and spiritual traditions that should be valued and respected, right? They have all these great traditions and we need to respect them. So paragraph 15 is really on Mary and the liturgy and things like that, and monasticism. So let's go through the paragraphs here, subparagraphs. There's A, B, C, D, E, so 5. A is the devotion to the liturgy in the East. B is love for Mary, the Blessed Mother. C is that they have true sacraments. D is the value of Eastern monasticism. And E is the value of Eastern liturgical and spiritual traditions, kind of summing up A through D. And why we care about this in ecumenism, right, in E. So let's start with 15A. Everyone also knows with what great love the Christians of the East celebrate the sacred liturgy, especially the Eucharistic celebration, source of the Church's life and pledge of future glory, in which the faithful, united with their bishop, have access to God the Father through the Son, the Word made flesh, who suffered and who was glorified. And so, in the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, then enter into communion with the Most Holy Trinity, being made sharers of the divine nature. Hence, through the celebration of the Holy Eucharist in each of these churches, the Church of God is built up and grows in stature. And through concelebration, their communion with one another is made manifest. So there we go. We have that very long paragraph, that very long sentence to start off. That's like, I have it, I don't know how many lines here. It's hard to count. Just a side note here, inside baseball, I kind of break these up by commas, kind of like if you do the readings in Mass, kind of how those are formatted, to help me read the text easier as I'm going through it, right? So anyways, so the liturgy is very important in the East. The liturgy as a tradition is valued almost at the level of the scriptures, and sometimes might even more than the scriptures in certain parts in the East, right? So this is a very, very important thing. And they don't want to change the liturgy at all, right? So for example, there was a division in the Russian Orthodox Church, I think in the 1800s or 1700s, because the Russian patriarch went to Greece and said, the Greeks do things a little different. Let's try and do them how the Greeks do it. And some people said, no, we should do them how the Russians have done them for centuries. And some of the things, the degree of things that are different are very minor. For example, do we hold out 3 fingers to the Trinity or 4 fingers to the 4 evangelists when we do the sign of the cross, right? As a Roman Catholic, you do it with your hand. If you just do it with your, first 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, all those are fine, right? But they're very precise in those type of things, right? And the liturgy is the source and summit of the Church's life, both in East and West, the Eucharistic liturgy. And obviously this connects into the Trinity, the Eucharist built up God's church, and here it talks about how that makes them like God, right? So in the East, they tend to talk about deification, are being made like God, whereas in the West, they tend to talk about sanctification, are being made holy. These really refer to the same reality of being made more like Jesus, being made more holy, but different emphasis, right? This is one of the things we talked about yesterday. We talked about, hey, there's different ways to explain things, but they both really can refer to the same thing. And deification, sanctification refer to that, right? So now let's read B and C on love for Mary and true sacraments. 15b. In the liturgical worship, the Christians of the East pay high tribute in beautiful hymns of praise to Mary, our Virgin, whom the Ecumenical Council of Ephesus solely proclaimed to be the Mother of God, to be the Holy Mother of God, so that Christ might be acknowledged as being truly Son of God and Son of Man, according to the Scriptures. Many also are the saints whose praise they sing, among them the fathers of Universal Church. C. These churches, although separated from us, possess true sacraments, above all by apostolic succession, the priesthood, and the Eucharist. whereby they are linked with us in closest intimacy. Therefore, some worship in common, communicatio and sacris, given suitable circumstances, and the approval of the church authority is not only possible, but to be encouraged. Right? So just before we go on, that communicatio and sacris means, sharing of like things like the Eucharist or the oil of chrism, things like that, right? Not just, we, share, something that's less sacred, right? So this idea is Mary is key, right? That's what we're talking about, and be there. She points us to Jesus, right? Emphasis is the one who declares her the mother of God, as noted, often referred to as the Theotokos, the God bearer, right? And that's what the Eastern Christians tend to use as the most common invocation of Mary, O Theotokos, right? Because the whole point of that declaration was to say Jesus is united in his person. He's not like separate God and man. And so this is how Mary points us to Jesus as well. So that's hopefully helpful. And I just want to read what they call the hymn or prayer to the Theotokos here as kind of, it's one of the more common ones, maybe not quite as common as the Hail Mary, but it's very common in the East as a hymn to Mary. So remember, Theotokos just means Mary, referring to as the mother of God. But so let's read this hymn. If you know me, I'm not going to sing it. It is truly meet to bless you, O Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement you gave birth to the word. True Theotokos, we magnify you. Right, so that is this devotion to Mary, which we can learn from, because we have devotion to Mary, and we can learn with them, right? So next of all, they have true sacraments, right? Keys are the Eucharist and Holy Orders, right? That links the rest, right? The apostolic succession from the bishops, so that we can have true Holy Orders, and then we can have true Eucharist, and then it links back in a kind of continual cycle. It's possible for intercommunion, they note. It's not common as a group thing. I haven't really seen it as a group thing much. There can be individual ones. More often, the Orthodox more often have problems with it than the Catholics do. This is something you should talk to your priest, both Orthodox and Catholic priest, about. If, say, you're dating someone who's Orthodox or something like that, and you go 1 week to the Catholic Church, 1 week to the Orthodox Church or something, well, can you each receive communion in each other's churches? How does that count as far as Sunday obligation, things like that? That is something to talk to your priest about individually. Anyway, so let's move on to 15d about the good of Eastern monasticism. So here's the text. Moreover, in the East are found the rich of those spiritual traditions which are given expression, especially in monastic life. There, from the glorious times of the Holy Fathers, monastic spirituality flourished, which then later flowed over into the Western world, and there provided the source from which the Latin monastic life took its rise and has drawn fresh vigor ever since. Catholics, therefore, are earnestly recommended to avail themselves of the spiritual riches of the Eastern Fathers, which lift up the whole man to the contemplation of the divine. So that monasticism, like monasticism refers to monasteries, religious life. That started in these, right? The St. Anthony of Egypt, St. Pachomius, things like that were some of the first ones. And this is a rich spiritual tradition. It came to the West. It came with St. Benedict, all the other ones. I've already recorded it, but for the Introduction to Perfecting Caritatis and Religious Life, we have a more extensive discussion, I think about 10 minutes, going over the history of religious life. 10, 15 minutes. It's probably the biggest section in that introduction, right? So hopefully that's helpful. I'm not going to go too in-depth here because I know I already recorded a much more in-depth one you're going to hear in a month or something. I don't remember the exact timing. Anyway, so this is valuable personal spiritual reading, right? So personally, I just finished not too long ago the Philokalia, which is a 5-volume set. Each volume is probably 300 pages. Of the fathers of the Eastern Church on kind of like the basic canonical collection of spiritual authors for the Eastern Christians. It's not like absolutely official, but it's the generally accepted one. And it's very valuable, right? And there's a lot, in their tradition of saying the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner, praying that, hundreds of times a day. I personally do that, but that's not required by any means by anybody. And it's not even the most common form of prayer for us in the West. But it is very common for monastics or other kind of contemplatives in the East, whether they be Postinics or things like that. So anyway, so let's move to the final paragraph here of 15e. the value of this and how it matters for ecumenism. Let's read it. The very rich liturgical and spiritual heritage of the Eastern churches should be known, venerated, preserved, and cherished by all. They must recognize that this is of supreme importance for the faithful preservation of the fullness of Christian tradition, and for bringing about the reconciliation between Eastern and Western Christians. Right? We should value these traditions, right? We should value all these traditions. We talked about the liturgy, monasticism, other spiritual traditions, right? And we don't want to overly Westernize, right? That was one thing we talked about Orientalum Ecclesiarum, where we talked about, hey, we want to maintain traditions and not just turn these other churches into semi-Latin churches or semi-Roman churches, right? So anyways, now we move on to paragraph 16, which talks about Eastern churches have valuable traditions in the legal or canonical areas that should be respected. So canonical here just refers to the laws of the church, as opposed to the laws of the state and things like that. So let's read the text here. Already from the earliest times, the Eastern churches followed their own forms of ecclesiastical law and custom, which were sanctioned by the approval of the fathers of the church, of synods, and even of ecumenical councils. Far from being an obstacle to the church's unity, a certain diversity of customs and observances only adds to her splendor, and is of great help in carrying out her mission, as has already been stated. To remove then all shadow of doubt, this holy council solemnly declares that the churches of the East, remembering the necessary unity of the whole church, have the power to govern themselves according to the disciplines proper to them, since these are better suited to the character of the faithful and more for the good of their souls. The purport observes this traditional principle, not always indeed carried out in practice, is one of the essential prerequisites for any restoration of unity. Right? So this goes back also to Orientalum Ecclesiarum, where he talked about, hey, there's the Code of Eastern Churches, and they have a lot more autonomy. They have different code of canon law. They have a lot more autonomy. And this idea, we bring back unity and hierarchy, that, the Pope is the Pope and, other bishops under him, and dogma, but it's not necessarily that things are done the same every place, right? There's unity in diversity. And even in the Eastern churches of the Catholic Church, not the Roman Catholic Church, because obviously it'd be like the Ukrainian Catholic or Maronite Catholic or Chaldean Catholic churches, they have a little more delegation naming bishops. They're not directly named by the Pope like they would be in the Roman Catholic Church, right? And we have to remember, law is meant to maintain and help the good of souls, not vice versa, right? It is meant to build up the church, help the good of souls. We're not here to serve the canon law. So this concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarCrest produce it. Another great podcast at sgpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarCrest Patreon. Tomorrow we are going to continue with the next paragraph, Unitatis Redintegratio, 17 to 18, which talks about moves for unity in East and West, between East and West. Now we'll conclude this section on the Orthodox. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like playlists and a reading plan, go to sgpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SGPN on Facebook and X.
Amen.